Truck Talk Media.
C10 Talk, episode 308. Differential Talk. We've got Ray from No Coast Differentials stopping by the studio. We're talking all things differentials. Here we go. Break this down for us. A spindle in the four-wheel drive world is different than a spindle in the two-wheel drive world.
Yes.
Yeah. Break that one down, because that one, for the C10 world, your two-wheel drive, you think, oh, I've got a 2.5-inch drop spindle, but that's more of like a knuckle in the four-wheel drive world.
Correct. As far as the actual spindle itself, they're the same thing, just one has an axle coming through it and one doesn't. But in the two-wheel drive world, it's basically the spindle and the knuckle are one unit, whereas the four-wheel drive world, the knuckle and the spindle are completely separate. So they bolt together.
Damn, son.
Hey guys, let me tell you about LMC Truck. Keeping generations on the road. Think about that. It's pretty deep. So whether your truck was handed down or something you went out and bought, odds are you were handed a bunch of paperwork, maybe a folder. In that folder was probably the catalog. You know the one, the most up-to-date and detailed catalog available today. It's like an encyclopedia for our trucks. Their website is just as detailed and informative. lmctruck.com. lmctruck.com. So whether you're restoring old memories or creating new ones, LMC Truck is here to help. They're more than just a parts company. They truly understand the lifestyle and passion of owning a classic truck. So get out there and get to work on your truck and know that LMC is here to help. You can get online, lmctruck.com, and order your free catalog today. Keeping generations on the road. lmctruck.com.
Let me tell you what Melbourne Toast is packing right here, all right? We've got 411 posi track out back, 750 double pumper, Edelbrock intakes, scored over 30, 11-1 pop-up pistons, turbojet, 390 horsepower. We're talking some bucking muscle.
What does that do? Does that blow your mind? That just happened.
Welcome to C10 Talk, your C10 Truck podcast.
And now I have a chance to be the best. Maybe the best in the world.
My old man is a television repairman. Got the ultimate set of tools. I can fix it.
I said I got 50 cents in that jukebox, and all I can hear is your mouth clapping. You hear that?
Here's your host, Ronnie Welch.
What's up, C10 Nation? How about a little tech, right? Tech is always good. A little discussion. And we've got our local hero, Ray and Rico from No Coast. And if you've got a guy, it's always good to have a guy. So for us locally here in the PHX, we've got Ray and Rico, No Coast, Differentials. And again, like we had Jason from Choice Transmission, you have a tranny guy, you've got a differential guy. We used to have a steering box guy, but I heard he sold and one of the guys that worked there moved. But the point is the knowledge and having that asset. So when you are working on your truck, when you are working on your rig, when you are building, having that go-to, if you decide to either buy parts or turn over the whole front, rear, differential, whatever it is you're doing. And that's why I asked Ray to come into the studio, chat it up, and I hope I asked most of the questions. I was trying to think, okay, what does the audience want to know? It is kind of funny because in this type of situation, I don't write much down. I'm just sitting here listening and thinking. And so in Ronnie fashion, you get a little bit a hodgepodge here, there, and everywhere. So bear with it. We hit a ton of different topics. Ray was awesome, and I hope we hit most of it. If we didn't, you can hit Ray up. He'd be more than happy to answer a question. And if not, you can hit me up, and I'll make sure that I ask it. But I think we got most of it. Some general baseline on differential talk to just kind of go through that. So 308 coming at you. 307 was great. I had Brian Morgan from Idaho on, C10 Truck Nut. minus the C in the middle there. C10 Truck Nut, give them a follow. Same with Ray and Rico, No Coast Differential. It's going to come up as No Coast Diff, D-I-F-F. We're about 3 weeks away from the reunion, the 4th senior year reunion. If you're local and you want to go, or hey, if you're not local and you want to go, fly in, come hang out. I think we got about 50 spots left. We did add some this year, and with our location, we can't put any more in there. So that's about the max. I think we'll probably be right around that 700 mark this year, which is pretty crazy. First year we did 350, then 500. Last year, 650. This year, 750. I do not think we could put much more in there. A lot going on coming up. You've got some kick-ass shows, and I've got pod already scheduled for the next 2 to 3 Ready to Rock, Ready to Rumble. So thanks again for tuning in, and we do appreciate it. I hope you like this one, the tech, the information. Let me know what you think. As always, pretty straightforward. RONNIE at trucktalkmedia.com. RONNIE at trucktalkmedia.com. Let me know. Questions, comments, concerns. All right, guys. Have a great week. Stay out of trouble. Do what you do. Late. Here we go. What up, C10 Nation? Stoked. I've got Ray Hambrick in the house, in studio. Ray is with No Coast Differential. They're out of Tempe, Arizona. And little tech, right? So you think about your differentials, your axles. Everybody's looking at that. Our trucks are 50 plus years old. And you're thinking, should I change my gears? Should I freshen those axles up? Am I going to narrow my rear end? So, Ray, thanks for taking time to come and hang out at the studio. Ray, you've been in business for how long now?
This will be 13 years now.
Okay, 13 years. How did you find yourself being Mr. Differential?
We kind of just fell into it, really. I mean, we started as more of like an off-road fab shop that did gear work. And then as the business grew and we learned more about what we were doing and so on, we just kind of abandoned the fab side and focused sheerly on the diff side, and it's just grown.
Were you an off-roader before? Now again, in full transparency, it's Ray and Rico.
Yep.
So you guys are partners, yep. And you kind of, it's cool to hear the story that you kind of just, hey, shit happens. We just fell into it, after 2008. I think you at one point said you were doing construction.
Yep.
Were you always a wrencher? Were you always into differentials, or did you just become an expert over time?
It was over time. Rico had a lot more background in it than I did, and so he taught me a lot. And I mean, we learned a lot together. We did a lot of side work, for years, and got a little shop, and then we're forced into going into business, and so here we are now.
Yeah. And you said about 13 years. Yep. It's been a journey. You've been through the 2008, right? So
yep.
When you think about the evolution of the gear differential business, what's some of the biggest changes you've seen over the years?
Probably just the quality of the product. There's not a whole lot of changes to be made. It's still fairly rudimentary as, the way it works, but the quality of the products, that the aftermarket support has grown a lot. So
okay, that's actually good, because I would almost think that we get a little worried as metal isn't as good as it used to be, and Moog isn't what it used to be, or something like that. So you're saying, hey, it actually has gotten better.
A lot of it has. It just all depends on where, who you're buying your parts from. And there's still a lot of really good companies out there that, still pride themselves on American-made stuff and, quality steel and, their quality control and stuff. So you got to be selective, but there's still a lot of really good options. What
about aftermarket? When you guys started, the NBS was kind of running its course at that point.
Mm-hmm.
You had for the trucks, you had rear disc brakes. Do you find that the aftermarket does or changes anything for you guys, where guys are wanting the latest and greatest to maybe bolt something under their old Jeep or their 4x4 or their C10 or whatever it might be?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's especially with like the brakes and the things like that, they've they make a lot more stuff. There's a lot more options. Back in the day, it was you had to kind of cobble something together, or create your own disc brake kit and things like that. And now with Willwood and Bear and CPP and stuff, they've come a long way with just bolt-on kits that look nice, they perform well. So it's definitely made it a lot easier to offer a lot more different products.
What would you say if you look back 13 years ago? What were you doing primarily from the perspective of the most common couple axles to and differential gearing to what you're doing now? Has it been the same, or have things changed?
No, things have changed quite a bit. The Chevy 10 bolt is always kind of our bread and butter. They like to put the G80 gov lock in them, and they like to blow up a lot, so they keep us pretty busy. The Jeep market was pretty big in the very beginning. That's kind of changed now. There's a lot more off-road shops that are doing some of their own gear work and stuff. So, and again, with the quality of the gears, it makes some of the setup a lot easier. So it's a little easier for some people that don't have all the same tools or the same knowledge to get some of that stuff set up. So,
do you have people that come in and say, hey, I don't know really what I want, but I know what I want to do with it? And then you guys kind of reverse engineer it to the customers. Okay, so walk us through that. So a guy comes in with a Monte Carlo SS. That seems to be the popular thing right now, the Super Bowl, the G-body. Somebody comes in with a Grand National. They want to really beef things up. What do you do with them?
Just basically start with trying to figure out what their end goal is, whether it's going to be an around town, a cruiser, street strip, things like that. Figure out their motor and tranny combo, what their final drive on the tranny is, what their tire size is, and just basically work it back mathematically from there and see, what RPM they want to be at what speed, so on and so forth. And then we figure out what axle they have and what's available. And then depending on the power that they're producing, figure out whether the axle that they have is going to be sufficient, or start pushing them towards an aftermarket axle like a 9-inch or a Mosier or something like that.
Great point. So what makes a 9-inch so much better than anything else?
The biggest thing is the pinion support and the pilot bearing in the third member. It keeps the pinion from being able to deflect under power. And you can build them to 35 and 40 spline axles and chromoly, and with companies like Strange and Mosier, you can do, gun drilled chromoly axles that handle 2,000 horsepower, and they're like Legos. The options are limitless.
Why did GM never make anything comparable, and or did they? Because the
GM 14 bolt, the 10.5, was kind of along the same lines, which is why it's so popular in the off-road stuff. And the downside is they're heavy, but they're super strong.
So lighter, Ford 9-inch, probably under a car. GM 14, something a little heavier, but more off-road.
Yeah.
Okay. So you talked about 35 and 40 plus spline axles. Mm-hmm. Our stuff, I think, is pretty much 28, 29, and 30. Is there ever a 31 in anything that's really factory?
The Ford stuff is 31 factory, like the Ford 8.8.
Okay.
And a factory Ford 9-inch is 28 and 31. And then GM is 28 and 30.
So for the C10 guys, that's you guys, you're 28 and 30.
Mm-hmm.
50-year-old C10, somebody wants to put some serious power down. Are you saying, hey, listen, we're gonna take your 12 bolt? Is a guy gonna build a 12 bolt these days with maybe some upgraded axles?
We build a lot of them. Fortunately, we're fortunate enough to do a lot of work with a lot of other shops in the valley, so they stress test it quite a bit. I mean, you can definitely build them to handle some power. It just kind of depends on what is big power to them, how much traction are they going to have. A lot of the times we'll cut the ends off, put 9-inch style in, so it's a bolt-in style axle, and you can get a chromoly axle, forged yokes. We can send the gears out to be cryoed and hardened, and put a rim polishing on them, which adds quite a bit of strength to them. So, I mean, we've got them out there in trucks that are putting down 650 plus to the wheels, and they're alive. I mean, they're doing well. It's not something that I would suggest much more than that, but it all depends on traction, really.
When you talk about sending those gears out, is that something where they're taking their old gears, or are you taking an aftermarket gear that's an upgrade and then sending it out?
We're taking a new gear and sending it out to be cryoed and get a rim polish on it.
So let's go good, better, best. So a guy comes in, he's got LS3, he's got 425 horsepower. He's like, hey, Ray, I want to be able to make sure that this isn't the weak link in my truck. What are you building for him? He's got an open checkbook for let's just do, again, good, better, best.
Good would be, a good set of aftermarket axles. So it's a C-clip axle you can't get in a chromoly, so you can only get a high carbon axle. So it's about 15 or 20% stronger than stock.
So for the audience, depending on your level, an axle that's held in with a C-clip, if you've ever taken your axles out of your rear end, they slide in. They've got a C-clip that holds them in, and you're saying, hey, that's going to be good. On the low end, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be good. The Detroit True Track is hands down the best posi on the market. It's a helical style posi with worm gears and a billet case. They're awesome. That's kind of the good. Better would
so
be,
everybody's going to get posi on all three, good, better, best?
I would. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
okay.
if you're putting that kind of horsepower down, I mean, you want both wheels spinning.
Okay. What happens? Bear with me. What happens if a guy has an old GM stock posi? I mean, it's garbage, right? I mean, it's old, it's 50 years old.
Most of them need rebuilt. There's no question about that. I'm not a fan of any of the stock posis. Most of them are a clutch style posi. So they're designed to wear out. It's just like a clutch, clutch in the tranny. It's going to wear out. And as it wears out, it spits all that clutch material through your bearings, through your gears, through your axles, so on and so forth. So, but usually by the time the posi wears out, it's already worn out everything else with it. So it's a never ending road with the clutch style posis. It's a thing that you're always going to have to maintenance.
Do you feel that slip? Is that something that you would feel? You're getting ready to put some power down and you've got a stock posi. Are you going to feel it, or are you automatically going to be like, hey, I'm doing a one-wheel peel and I thought that I had a posi?
It'll get progressive over time. It just kind of depends on how much you're paying attention to it. You should start to feel it. I mean, they're a little bit more aggressive, like on day-to-day driving, going around corners and stuff. They have more of a tendency to like bark tires and stuff like that, and they'll slowly stop doing that. And then as you start putting more and more power down, consistently, then as they start to wear out, they'll let one wheel slip, and if you can go back and see your burnout marks or whatever, should be able to see the difference.
Well, and I haven't forgot about the C10 guy with the LS and the coming in for good, better, best. I probably should have started this way. Let's just go over some basic, really glossary. Let's talk third member, let's talk posi, let's talk open diff, let's talk some real basic stuff to walk the audience. Maybe we've got a young kid, maybe we got somebody who's just getting into wrenching. So let's just start there. So two-wheel drive truck, obviously front end, you've got no diff for Chev. You've got your GM 12 bolt in the back, 3/4 ton, you can work your way up. Posi, break that down to what that does.
It's fairly basic. It just makes both wheels spin at the same time. Again, there's a couple different styles. Like I said, I like the True Track. It's a torsion style. It's got really great road manners, so it acts like an open differential when you're driving around. But then when one wheel starts to spin faster than the other, it has helical cut gears in there that are like corkscrew gears that drive themselves against the side gears, and it essentially locks up both tires. So it just works when it's supposed to, doesn't when it's not. The clutch style posis work. Like I said, not as good at road manners typically. You'll get some torque steer on and off the throttle. It'll can bark tires and stuff around corners, and again, designed to wear out. Then you can get super aggressive, go like a full locker, like a Detroit locker or something like that. Very, very reliable, very strong, very obnoxious on the street, do really well at like the track and off-road and things like that. And then if you want to get real crazy, you can get into the selectable lockers like the ARBs or the electric lockers. And it's just, you turn them on with the switch, turn them off, and it's a full locker like a spool.
So for the audience, ARB is going to be air. You're going to turn air, and it's going to essentially push air to like a transmission to lock those up.
Yeah, they have a diaphragm in there, and then you apply the air, it pushes the diaphragm over and it locks the cogs inside. E-locker is the same principle, it just uses an electromagnet instead of the air. Okay,
so either air or electric, and then also pull cable, correct? Is that old school and more for the front?
Those do exist. I try and stay away from them.
Okay.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with them.
Maybe more in the four-wheel drive world for the front?
A little bit. The downside is the cable has to come in through the cover, so you've got it exposed. So if you are in the rocks and things like that, there's a possibility of breaking that fitting off, and then you got no locker. So
yeah. Okay. So you've got your open diff, you've got posi. What about third member?
Third member kind of would refer to like the carrier, so that would more or less refer to like the open diff or the posi or something like that. And unless it's the case of a 9-inch, then the third member is the dropout.
Yeah, and so for the audience, if you're going to build something, do you encourage people to go with a third member? Like I guess, what level are guys going to that level? Is it a 9-inch and they're like, hey, I need to have this front third member. I'm going to be racing this, or because in a C10, I don't see it that much. I do see it when guys got a lot of money in maybe a chassis. They're going to be putting a huge power down, but for the general audience, it's not something we see very often.
Not super often. I mean, we do build a lot of them. The 12 bolt is a good axle. I mean, it holds up. We've built a lot of them, like I said, for some fairly high horsepower trucks, and they do real well. Again, the options of a 9-inch are a lot broader. You have a lot more options of gear ratios and things like that. Brakes are another thing. You can get big brake kits and that sort of thing with the 9-inch. It's getting better for the 12 bolt, just from the popularity of the C10 stuff, but there are limitations. You don't have as many gear ratios to choose from. There's what they call carrier brakes, which is the deck height of the carrier for different ratios. So some manufacturers only make certain posis for certain ratios, so that kind of limits you on the 12 bolt as well.
What is a great ratio? What I mean, it's obviously you're going to get into tire size, you're going to get into what transmission, what kind of horsepower. Break some of those down for us. What you tend to advise your clients on getting back into the good, better, best.
It kind of comes down to motor and tranny, and tire size is the biggest thing. If you're running an overdrive tranny, the 373 is a smoke and go to. I mean, it's you get plenty of torque off the line. It's not revving to the moon when you're on the highway. It's a really good middle of the road. If you still got a 3-speed like a turbo 400 or turbo 350, then it really comes down to what RPM are you going to be running it at what speed. So that kind of also breaks down if you're running an LS or a conventional small block. For LS, you can get away with a little bit more RPM. Small block, conventional carbureted small block isn't going to want to run 3,500 RPM down the freeway all the time. So then you start getting down into like a 342 or a 308 or something like that.
Yeah. Do you find that when are we past that point where these, I guess, I don't think we are, but where these 50-year-old trucks are, meant to go 55 and 65, we run them at 75 and 80. They're running at 3,100, 3,200 RPM. Are you seeing that where you're like, dude, these 50-year-old truck, 55-year-old truck, we got to change some things up for you. You're still running a carb, and here's your ratio. We need to really look at changing your rear end and maybe going with a higher gear.
Yeah, we do quite a bit of that. It just depends on, it comes down to what their long-term goal of the truck is. A lot of people have an LS swap or something and plan for the future, so they don't want to spend the money twice, and I get that. And a lot of people they're super happy with their old carbureted turbo 350 tranny, and we try and get it down and get it a little bit more manageable and quit beating the motor and tranny up so bad.
Do you find that people are still running a lot of 350 400s, or are most people have at least evolved to the 700 R4, maybe a 4L60, 4L80, 6L90? What are you seeing in the last 5 years? What's the trends?
It's a surprising mix-up. I mean, definitely the 700 and the 4L80 and the 4L60 and so on is becoming a lot more popular, especially with the power managements and all the stuff that goes along with it. So that's definitely much more popular, but there are still a lot of guys that have, just a factory style truck and they don't want to mess with it. They don't have any plans of changing anything. So it's kind of a different crowds, but it's a mixture, but it's definitely leaning more towards the overdrive stuff.
Yeah. I kind of wonder. So walk us through a typical day, a typical week. What are you wrenching on? What are you guys building? Hey guys, are you thinking about swapping out your old motor for a more reliable LS-LT based power plant? Behind each PSI harness, you get over 10 years of experience in the business, online tech support, phone support, and harnesses made in the U.S. That's psiconversion.com. What's up, guys? Who doesn't like to bundle and save? The team at UP Car Parts knows this, and they put together 7 different bundles for you to choose from to save up to 20% off of your lighting. From headlights to taillights to marker lights, UP Car Parts got you covered. upcarparts.com. Save up to 20% today.
You've heard me talk about my gauges. Dakota Digital. I love them. Dakota Digital has the best gauges for our trucks. These kits are complete with sensors for any engine. They look just like the stock clusters, but have all the technology you'd expect from Dakota Digital. It's like a modern truck, but even better in a classic. Dakota Digital is absolutely the best in aftermarket gauges, so check them out at dakotadigital.com. dakotadigital.com.
So walk us through a typical day, a typical week. What are you wrenching on? What are you guys building?
It comes in waves. It's really kind of weird. I mean, we'll get weeks of Toyotas, we'll get weeks of C10s, we'll get Chevelles and hot rods, and then we'll have construction vehicles of just all 1-ton cabin chassis style things. It's completely random. So it's also kind of weird because it seems like it comes in waves of like certain vehicles will have, won't see one for a month or two, and then all of a sudden we'll have 10. So it's just depends on what's breaking, I guess.
Yeah. And kind of cool that it keeps it, the change and the flow, because then you're not doing the same shit all the time.
That does make it nice. I mean, it's in theory the same thing, but it's slightly different. Every rear end has kind of their own little idiosyncrasies and different ways that you got to set them up or test things and so on. So it keeps things at least a little interesting.
All right, so working our way back to good, better, best. The guy comes in, same setup. He's got a decent horsepower LS. He's running 4L60, which is kind of, to me, is going to be the weak link. And he wants best instead of, good, better, best. He wants better.
If money is not an option type thing, then we would cut the housing ends off the 12 bolt, convert it to like a 9-inch bolt-in style housing end. That way he can get the chromoly axles, still run the true track, probably get him a forged yoke, convert the...
So walk me through that. So I've got a 12 bolt, and you're going to cut, so you're going to create a Ford 9-inch pumpkin?
No. So it's Ford 9-inch housing ends. So out at the ends, like basically where your brakes and everything.
Yeah, okay. So you're going to cut the ends off.
Yep. So cut the ends off. We have a jig and a rotisserie that we weld on new ends. And it's converts it to what we call a 9-inch style end. So it's a bolt-in style end, but we can still retain the GM bolt pattern. So you can still run a GM style brake on it. But it converts it to the 9-inch axle or 9-inch style axle. And still the true track, probably upgrade to like a forged yoke with a 1350 U-joint in it.
Now we're still on better. We're not on best yet, or did we jump to best?
No, that would still be better than
than
the C-clip axle. That's kind of the next evolution. So it's, good would be a high carbon shaft, new ring and pinion, true track,
keeping the C-clip axle,
keeping the C-clip.
What do you up from a 28 spline to a 30 something else? Are you changing that out?
12 bolt never came with anything except for 30.
Okay.
You can bump them up to a 33 spline. That gets a little tricky. There's not a lot of options for.
Would you say 30 is suffice?
So far, yeah.
For good?
Yeah, for good. Oh, yeah, for plenty for good.
Okay.
And then, like I said, better would be convert the housing ends over, change the axle style, and then slightly better than that, maybe add like a TA, like a girdle cover or something. And if you want best, the 4 9-inch. That's just.
What's the breakdown? There's just thinking the same guy, money wise, good, better, best.
What do you mean breakdown? Like the cost of it?
Yeah. So good, better, best. So if I bring you a 12 bolt and I want new axles, I'm going to go with the 30 spline, brand new, because my old axles are 50 years old. We're going to go from good. And break, what would that cost if I said, hey, I want you, Enrico, I want you guys to build me this axle for my C10, good, better, best?
Good, you're probably going to start, it's somewhere around $2,500, somewhere in there. Everything's changing by the day.
Sure.
As far as cost-wise. Better, you're probably going to be in the $3,500-ish range. And then a 9-inch... without brakes, you're $4,800.
Okay. Do you guys build it complete with brakes if a guy wants some Willwoods or some Bears? Okay.
Yeah.
So I want Bear. Obviously, let's just talk rear. So I don't need 6-piston for the back.
Mm-hmm.
So I want a good, better, best. I want a better Bear rear brake.
Well, Bear and Willwood, they're all over the board, and with Little Shot Manufacturing now, they make a bunch of the big brake kits and stuff. So
and CPP,
and
McGoey's I think still does, right?
Yeah, I think they do. We don't deal a whole lot with them.
Okay.
Nothing against them, just
yeah. So many options.
Yeah, it's kind of limitless, and so it just kind of depends on what you want. And I mean, you can start some of the brake kits start around $900,000, and you can get up $4, $5, $6, $7,000.
Yeah, so I was thinking the same, like 15 to 2,000 to if we're at good, depending where we're at on price. So just so the audience could kind of know, because that would be kind of uniform across. So good, better, best, depending on what brake you wanted to run.
Yeah,
and you at that point would say, hey, this is what we can get, and this is how much these brakes are going to cost, and what are you going to run for the front, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so good, better, best, we're looking at 25, 35, and 45, maybe closer to 5.
Mm-hmm.
What about okay, so that's going to be most of the tool drive guys. What about if we want to narrow an axle and we want to just keep it pretty simple, but hey, we really want a lot of lip. Guys are going to want, they want to run 2415s.
Mm-hmm.
They want to run 112s. They need that narrow rear end. They're going to keep their stock 12 bolt. What's something like that run?
Kind of depends on whether they want to drive it in, drive it out, or pull it out and bring it in. Typically, like a typical narrow axles said and done is right around $1,000.
Okay. So let's say we got a lot of DIYers. They're at home. They're going to pull their axle. They're going to cut it, and not try to take any business away from you, obviously, but pretty simple, right? You're going to undo your C-clips, pull your axle shafts out. You're going to cut your tubes. You're going to measure. You're going to put new axle shafts in. At that point, should they do anything with the gearing? Should they freshen it up? Should they consider changing things out? And they could pretty much build it themselves, correct?
I mean, if they have the right jigs, to do it right, requires a specific jig that basically centers the the housing ends with the carrier bearings. So it's not so much of like just jigging up the outside of the tube. It's aligning the where the axle housing goes in to where it meets into the carrier bearing. So there's a little bit more to it than that. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of guys that get away with just the angle iron or whatever they're doing in their driveway. I would always suggest if you're getting into it, throwing bearings at it. I mean, they're not crazy expensive. It's cheap insurance.
Yeah, I mean, you're already there.
Yeah.
So what about the yoke? What about the gearing? What's something they should be looking at?
That it's kind of tricky, I mean, because unless you do it all the time, being able to look at a gear and tell when it's bad or when it's, if it's not obvious, if it's not missing pieces or just rusted through or something, it's being able to read the pattern it's kind of something that just comes with this experience.
Have you, you look back when you were, let's say you were doing constructions and you're like, dude, I would have never known this. I would have never known this. And who in the hell ever thought I would know this? What's something that you're just like, I can't believe that I even know this to this day of doing this for 13, 14, 15 years. And you're like, just the gee whiz of it.
It's hard to say. I mean, I guess part numbers is like why I retain the amount of part numbers in my head, and some of it I guess is just like I said, every axle has like their little idiosyncrasies and different ways that they like to be set up, and different gear manufacturers have different tendencies, and like I said, reading the pattern. When you look at it from the beginning, like when I first started, it was like you'd run a pattern on a gear and you look at it and you're like, there's paint and it's made a pattern. And now being able to look at it and say, hey, this is deep, this is shallow, this is, we can, knowing whether or not to mess with the pinion depth, or you can get away with messing with the backlash, and the idiosyncrasies really is just what I would have never known to even look for when I first started doing it.
Yeah, and every time I've been in, it seems like Rico's kind of more of the wrencher, and you're the computer guy ordering the parts and managing the place. And I don't know if you're that just happens to be every time I come in, or if you're both splitting time and you're both completely wrenching. That just seems to be kind of the way it is, where you would know those numbers because you're constantly ordering, buying, selling parts all day long.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely more or less runs the shop.
Yeah.
I mean, I spend a fair amount of time in the shop as well, but I more or less run the front side of it. So
yeah, I mean, it takes two, right? It's funny to think like, at one point, one guy's trying to do it all. And if you have the right guy ordering the parts, if you have the wrong guy, you're going to spend a lot more time in the shop. You're going to lose money.
Yeah, it works out for us, because I do the scheduling. So then I, order the parts and so on and so forth. So kind of keep track of our inventory, and, he keeps the shop running. So it works for us.
So if I brought you a truck, or if you were going to build something, give us a breakdown of what you would build for your rear end.
Back to the 9-inch.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I said, it's like Legos, and there's just so many options. They're so strong for what they are. That they're not cheap by any means, but if you think about it, having to do it twice, it's kind of cheaper to buy the 9-inch and be done with it.
Why are they so expensive?
There's just there's a lot more parts to them. And then if you're trying to buy a quality, housing and third member and so on, and get something that's made in America and not Chinese and not just repopped, recycled garbage, then you pay a company that builds them in America, and they got to be able to pay for it. So
yeah, the premium.
Yeah.
Are you, and we don't have to get too off on this tangent, but are you worried about some of the tariffs and some of the things and the parts that come overseas, or are you seeing a lot of companies trying to use said American parts?
We're not too worried. I've reached out to a lot of our suppliers, and for the most part, we've always kind of prided ourselves in using the best parts that are available. There's times, when you have to get some import stuff, but the majority of our suppliers try and keep it as domestic as possible. So, I mean, we run into things here or there, but it's not a huge concern as of right now.
I always just kind of go back to the old days of Spicer was a big one. Is that still a pinnacle, or who's the pinnacle of gearing and parts when it comes to what you guys deal with?
It kind of just depends on what application. I mean, Spicer, anything Dana, they're still, kind of cream of the crop. They're anything Dana, that Spicer is Dana.
Yeah, I was like, isn't Dana?
Yeah.
Okay.
When it comes to like the 9-inch stuff or like GM 12-bolt car, US Gear they're kind of the best of the best out there.
What about like back to my 4-wheel drive days, but like you had Randy's and Yukon and some of those bigger ones, are they still around? And
They are. Randy's basically was Yukon.
Okay. Randy's always had really nice calendars. I just want to mention that.
Yeah, I remember.
Like smoking hot chicks, like really hot chicks, and that was Randy's. That was his marketing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to badmouth another company. When Randy owned it, he had a good quality product. It was, the Yukon was kind of they paved the way for a lot of especially the Jeep and off-road aftermarket stuff. I'm not so big of a fan of them now. Most of their stuff I think is import. I can't say for sure, but there's a lot of it comes from overseas or China, and you never know what you're getting. I can't say that it's not a good product. I just prefer not to use it.
Do you ever get a run where, like, from the perspective of a bad batch, somebody you build a few, whether it's a strip car, strip truck, a 4x, a Jeep, a 4Runner, a K10, and they're all coming back, and you're like, dude, did we just get some shitty gears here, or it was a bad batch? Do you ever see that in your career?
Yeah, we've run into it a couple different times. Mostly in the aftermarket stuff, and not really with the higher end like US Gear stuff like that, but some of the heavy truck stuff doesn't have a whole lot of aftermarket support, and the OE is not always readily available, so you're kind of stuck with some of the aftermarket.
Okay.
So we've ran into it a couple times. Luckily, our main vendor has batch numbers and everything on everything, so it becomes pretty apparent really quick that if we get 2 sets in a row that come back, then we just ship the whole batch back and start with something different.
Yeah. Do you sometimes tell them versus, hey, we need to think about a recall here, or do they usually kind of lead the way and say, hey, Ray, we've got like 6 of these that are bad. We need to make sure we're getting this batch back from you here and replace them?
It goes both ways. I mean, we do a fair amount of volume with them. So a lot of times they're finding out from us, but they're also really good about if they run into a problem, they usually notify us pretty quick. So
yeah, they don't want that shit out there, and neither do you.
No.
Yeah, neither does the customer. What's a turnaround time on an axle or a set of axles?
It all just depends. I mean, if we're ordering custom axles, it's usually about a week and a half. Mosier's our primary distributor for that stuff. And so they're out of Indiana, so they're real quick on building them. Usually they'll have them built within 2 days. It's just the shipping, getting it here and then waiting for UPS to do UPS things. And so usually about a week and a half between work days and whatnot.
All right. I kind of think we'll go 4x, and then I want to talk a little bit about parts and whether or not they can buy parts from you, because we want you to make money, and whether or not they should go to a big box like a Summit or a Speedway. Let's talk 4x4 first. Front axles. What do you like? What do you hate?
There's really not a whole lot of options. I mean, as far as like the C10 stuff or like the Blazers and K5s, K10s, something like that. It's pretty much all either a Dana 44 or a Chevy 10 bolt.
Yep. All half ton for the audience.
Yeah.
Well, no, Dana 44 could be 3/4.
Yeah. They put 8 lug outers on the 44, so they called it 3/4, but it's just
still a half ton beefed up.
But
everybody wants the 60, right? I mean, that's the creme de creme.
That's kind of the big dog on the block is the 60. Until
you
start
the Dana 60 for the audience.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Until you start getting into like the Dynatrack and the Curry and stuff like that, and then they've got all kinds of limitless stuff. But
for OE, out there, plentiful, or at one point was plentiful. Now they're getting bought up pretty quick, right? So
yeah.
I know some guys, they really flaunt that they've got 5, 6, 7 Dana 60 sitting there. This is a question, are all Dana 60s, or did GM is there ever a passenger side Dana 60, or are they all driver side?
So Ford is driver side and GM is passenger side.
But when is a GM Dana 60 in? Like maybe a military vehicle? Because really, I feel like everything, mostly Fords had the Dana 60, whereas would it all have been a 1-ton truck, a 1-ton square?
So Fords, all their 1-tons had them. The Chevys, a lot of their 1-tons had them. All their military stuff had them.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest difference is the Fords were a high pinion. The Chevys were a low pinion. The Fords were a kingpin style front end for a couple years, and then the Chevys were all ball joints.
So when you're out scavenging the junkyard, you're looking for those Dana 60s. Right?
If they exist. I haven't seen one at a junkyard in probably 15 years.
Yeah, they got, I mean, I do see where people will try to, I think I know I have a set of the 60s, the military, those old square bodies are still around that you can find, but that does tend to be the OE style. So let's say somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want to build, I want you to build one. What do you, do you stockpile that stuff to try to build the best 3/4 ton 4x4 front diff you can?
I try not to stockpile a bunch of used stuff. Most of the stuff, depending on what they're putting it in, like the Ford Super Duty axles are still fairly abundant and easily accessible. Doesn't do the GM guys a whole lot of good. When it comes to like the GM 60, it's call around, it's, friends and family, whoever might have something stockpiled, or you have to go with like Curry or Dynatrack or something like that. Yeah.
So for the audience, think about Chev goes independent, right? So you got IFS front.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to find a solid axle. Ford's got solid axle, but your diff's on the wrong side.
Correct.
So that's why a GM passenger side Dana 60 is so expensive.
Yeah. And they're hard to find.
Yeah. Because guys want them. So what's the option? You're literally just saying, hey, we need to buy a Curry front end then, or if I said, hey, I want you to build me a no coast, are you piecing it all together?
I wouldn't. It wouldn't be cost effective to have me do it.
Cheaper to buy a Curry.
Yeah, unfortunately, you could get super crazy and start changing the transfer case to switch whether it's a driver or passenger side drop, but that's not very cost effective. It would all come down to what you're using the vehicle for, I guess. So if it was going to be just a straight trailer queen off-road vehicle, then you're probably going to change the transfer case anyhow. If it's not, then it might not be the most cost effective thing to get too far down the rabbit hole.
Do you ever see guys chase the 60 with a 44? Meaning they try to really just build their 44 because they have it, or
all the time.
Okay, so walk us through that, because you're like, hey, I want a 60, I can't get one. It's a waste of my time and money to try to find one. I've got a nice 44 here. Just build me a bomb-proof 44.
So there's again a fair amount of stuff for them now.
So you bought a C10 and it either had AC at one time or it wasn't even an option. Well, Vintage Air has the solution for you. Their SureFit kits are designed to place the evaporator and hoses behind the dash for a factory clean look. The Vintage Air SureFit kits are the best value and the most completely engineered air conditioning system you can install in your C10. Damn, son, the choice is obvious. VintageAir.com.
So you're thinking about converting your truck from a long bed to a short bed. Here's what you need. Brothers Trucks long bed to short bed conversion bracket. Includes laser etched steel templates with all the holes clearly marked and steel inner C-channel braces. It also includes front to rear brake lines, shorter parking brake cables, hardware, and all the detailed instructions telling you what to do. You can also jump on Brothers' YouTube channel for a detailed step-by-step video to make the process easier. Brothers Trucks has an easy solution for you, and they even offer bedside parts as well. BrothersTrucks.com.
Classic Performance Products, CPP back. Joe, let's talk X10 spindles. Go.
One of our most popular parts through the years has been our 2.5-inch drop modular spindles. Really popular part. Well, we've kind of taken that to the next step. We've emulated late model Corvette, Silverado, Chevy technology into our new X10 drop spindles. They use a steel hub, sealed bearing hub, really strong piece. It's oversized bearings. Definitely great for a guy using big brakes, big wheels, which I'm sure all your guys are.
You need a new spindle anyways. You're going to lower your truck. You're running a bigger wheel, a bigger brake. CPP's got it for you with their new X10 spindle. Joe, as always, thank you. CPP, classicperform.com. It's classicperform.com.
Sniper 2. Are you ready to switch out that old carb for a modern EFI system? Well, Holley has a solution for you. The all-new Sniper 2. This new system was redesigned from the ground up. Available in tumbled polished or black powder coat, and there's 3 available tuning interfaces. A classic 3.5 handheld, a 5-inch mountable, which includes a GPS speedo or a Bluetooth module so you can use your smartphone. Another big bonus is the Sniper 2 has a built-in transmission control module. So if you're looking to upgrade to a 4-speed overdrive, 4L60, 4L80, you now can with ease. Holley.com to get started today. Holley.com. Meaning they try to really just build their 44 because they have it, or
all the time.
Okay, so walk us through that, because you're like, hey, I want a 60, I can't get one. It's a waste of my time and money to try to find one. I've got a nice 44 here. Just build me a bomb-proof 44.
So there's again a fair amount of stuff for them now. You can beef them up. Reed makes some really nice, really strong knuckles for them, like Reed Racing.
Yep. So for the audience, that's going to be the orange. A lot of times you see the orange outer knuckle.
Yep.
And break this down for us. A spindle in the 4-wheel drive world is different than a spindle in the 2-wheel drive world.
Yes.
Yeah. Break that one down, because that one, for us, for the C10 world, your 2-wheel drive, you think, oh, I've got a 2.5-inch drop spindle, but that's more of like a knuckle in the 4-wheel drive world.
Correct. As far as the actual spindle itself, they're the same thing. Just one has an axle coming through it and one doesn't. But in the 2-wheel drive world, it's basically the spindle and the knuckle are one unit, whereas the 4-wheel drive world, the knuckle and the spindle are completely separate. So they bolt together.
So back to the 44.
And with companies out there like RCV, so you can do like Reed knuckles and RCV shafts, and again, send your gears out for cryo and rim. And that's about as, you can add axle trusses to them and things like that, but it's at some point you're just chasing weak links depending on tire size and horsepower and so on.
Well, great point. Segue to the weak link, whether it is the rear or the front. What are you commonly seeing? Again, back to kind of what a stock guy might have all the way up. What tends to be the weakest link?
And the C10 stuff, it's on the 12 bolts, it's the pinion shaft is usually the weak link. On the 44s, same thing, the pinion shaft. They've got fairly small diameter pinion shafts, so when the gear does let go, it typically seems to be in the pinion. Once in a while, you'll see them where it'll strip the gear off the ring gear. It's not super common, more so in the front side that we see more often, and usually that's from like bouncing and getting on something and losing traction and gaining traction real fast, and that's usually hard on parts.
Yeah, just the torque, right?
Yeah, it's the shock load, really.
Yeah. So back to the 4x4 and go to you kind of talk about the Dana 44, trying to make a Dana 52 because you're trying to build this 44 to be as good as a 60. When you get into the usage of that, so let's say a guy is like, it's not King of the Hammers type stuff, right? Because they're going to have the very best of the best. What would necessitate them really saying, I can't have this 44 anymore because it just keeps breaking. Somebody who's a Jeep guy, somebody who's just doing massive rock crawling and really loading it, because I think a built 44 should handle 80% of what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, a built 44 is still a really good axle. I mean, when it comes to like the off-road kind of stuff, there's so many variables. Like I said, horsepower, tire size, driving style. You know, if a guy knows when he's bound up and, you know, bouncing to get out of the throttle and take it easy or take a different line. And then there's other guys that just want to shoot it and put the pedal down and just not lift. And 44s usually don't live long that way.
Yeah. Or do transmissions.
Or most parts.
Or transfer cases. Do you guys do much work with transfer cases, or do you farm all that out?
Not anymore. Well, most of that gets farmed out now.
Okay. 205 still king of the hill?
I mean, again, aftermarket, I think there's always Atlas and like Hero cases, and there's a couple new companies that have come out. But as far as like a factory's unit, 205 still the end all be all of a factory. Yeah,
versus like a 203 or a 208. It does seem funny that at whatever point when they went to the full time, you know, to have that full time, and then it just seems like I kind of wonder, is that a good thing or a bad thing that somebody doesn't have to get out to switch over their axles?
I mean, I'm not a huge fan. It's just kind of more stuff to go wrong. The 205's tried and true. It's, you know, there's not a lot going on in there. A lot of people don't like them because they don't have a super low range. When you go into low range, the ratio is not super low. But as far as strength-wise, you can't beat them. The 203 is strong. They're just a boat anchor. They weigh a ton. There's a lot of stuff going on in them. 208 that's when they went to aluminum case, and it's chain-driven, and there's differentials inside the transfer case and so on, and it's not nearly as strong.
Especially gear versus chain. And stretching and overtime and do you see that, you know, maintenance wise, guys aren't maintaining their differentials? I was kind of thinking the transfer case, but then obviously we're here for diff talk. Do you see people not taking care of their front and rear ends?
That's probably the majority of our repairs, is just people don't know when to do the service, that it should be serviced. It's not something that gets brought up a lot of the times. It's real common. We get a lot of guys with like the 3/4 ton trucks that, you know, take really good care of their stuff, but they have a boat or something. So they're constantly backing the boat in the water, and they don't realize that it's getting full of water and it's just eating stuff up in there. So lack of maintenance is probably 85% of our repair work.
Do you guys do maintenance?
Yeah.
Okay.
We do.
So somebody just wants to come in and bring their stuff in, you'll do their front and rear def and transfer case too?
Yeah, we'll do with a lot of the transfer cases. If it's an import or something, or some of like the Jeep Grand Cherokees and stuff, that we try and stay away from. But yeah, we do all kinds of.
I'll give you a funny story. One time I had to get the tow behind camper, 26-foot trailer, and I put it in 4 high. And this is my 07 Classic, which is an 06 leftover. Put it in 4 high, just right there on the button, and pulled the trailer out. We were up north on the Young Road, and drove all the way home, you know, pretty straight. Got into the driveway and started backing up the trailer, and I'm like, you went to turn, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm still in 4 high. So yeah, that made me definitely stress, you know, whatever, 180 miles or 100 and I guess probably 30, 40 miles. Switched it all out, went to Mobile One, made sure there was no flakes. But yeah, definitely a stressful thing. What do you recommend? What do you recommend fluid wise? What do you recommend on intervals, on classics, on dailies, whatever?
As far as intervals, I mean, if you're between 30 and 40,000 miles, it's always a good idea to change it out then. I always tell people, you know, if you go through any water, if you think you got it hot, if you had a big load on it that you know, pulling a big hill that you don't normally do, it's not that expensive to change the diff fluid. Get fresh oil in there. At our shop, we only run Lucas, the 85 140. So that's it's kind of that. I mean, we just Lucas would be at every 30 or 40,000. Anytime that you think you went through water, anytime you think it might have got hot.
All right. What about like a diff gasket? Do you prefer just going with an RTV? Do you run gaskets? I see shops do both ways.
We do both. Like the ultra gray RTV is great. The lube blockers have come a long way. They seem to be holding up to the kind of the test of time. As far as the paper gaskets and stuff like that, we don't mess with that. If you're not going to run a lube blocker, just get like a good ultra gray or something like that.
All right, cool. So maintain every 30 to 40,000, run Lucas front and rear and transfer case, or
no, every transfer case is slightly different. Some of them take more of like a what do they call that?
I think for my Duramax, it's Mobile One synthetic is what they want.
Some of them are synthetic. Some of them are gear oil. Some of them are transmission fluid.
Yeah, so look it up. And decide. But I do think that a diff front and or rear and transfer case, just absolutely the most overlooked. I mean, do they even get love at all? It just seems like it's crazy how much they just don't get love. And it might just be out of sight, out of mind, and it might be a cost, and everybody's just trying to save a little bit of money.
I'm not sure what it is, but they definitely don't as much, and a lot of people I think just don't know. You know, it's not something that's pushed all the time. You know, you hear about tranny flushes and oil changes in the motor and stuff, and yet a lot of shops just don't push the diff service. So
yeah. What about maintenance on like U-joints and stuff like that, on the C10s, on the 4x4s, the K10s? Just lubing it up on a constant yearly basis, making sure everything's nice, and get yourself a grease gun and lube it all up.
Yeah. I mean, lubrication is key. I mean, that's what kills everything is when that stuff either gets hot and breaks down or just wears out over time. I mean, maintenance is anything that you can maintenance on your own. I mean, I would.
Do you have a suggestion? Get your grease zerk, push oil or grease into it until you see clear, or clean it again?
It kind of depends on what it is. Like a lot of the drive shafts that we get now come with non-serviceable joints.
Yeah. A lot of stuff does.
A lot of places are saying that that's a better joint, that they don't like the grease zerks. I can't speak to whether or not that's the case or not. We kind of try and stay out of the drive shaft world. We have a couple shops here in town that we use, but we more or less try and kind of stay in our lane, do what we're good at, and
okay. What about back to the front for a 4x4, 44s, 60? Anything else out there that you would recommend if somebody comes in? Are you same thing, or are they gonna say, hey, I'm gonna send you off to Curry, or what are you looking at?
Well, there's not a ton of options. It's especially the C10 stuff. It's 44, 60, or like I said, 10 bolt. And then.
And just for the audience, I can't remember if I mentioned earlier, but a 44 is a 10. It's Dana made the 44. GM kind of took that and then made their own, right? Yeah.
So the GM 10 bolt, the GM 10 bolt front was made by corporate. So essentially, they look very, very similar. They run the same outers, same hubs, wheel bearings, so on and so forth. That's different gear set, slightly different bearings,
and a switchover right around like 78, maybe.
I believe it was an 80.
Oh, okay, an 80.
Yeah,
okay.
I believe so. Don't hold me to it.
Yeah, it's right there. So you've got a GM 10 bolt in the front, or if it's older, then you're going to have a 44.
You should.
But at the end of the day, not that much different. When it comes down to overall tried, true, and tested, I think it's about the same. I don't think there's a big difference where you don't see somebody saying, oh, the 44 is so much better than the 10 at all. You see the 60s better than both, and then the 44 and the 10 come in tied for second.
Yeah, the biggest difference is that the 44 came stock with 30 spline axles, and the GM 10 bolt front came stock with 28 spline axles.
Those little bastards.
So
why would they do that?
I couldn't tell you. Money, I'm sure. You can upgrade a 10 bolt to make it a 30 spline.
Okay.
But factory for factory, the 44 is in theory a little stronger because you got a little bit beefier axle shaft.
Wow. Okay, good. So just a tad better. That's good to know. What about, again, going back to ratio? Are you looking for a 411 456, depending on tires. And, for the audience, again, I'm just trying to throw the knowledge out there. The bigger you go in tire, you're going to want to be lower in gear, because if you were running a 275 and now all of a sudden you're running a 37, then you're going to have a massive difference. Your speedo is going to be off. You're going to want to consider going to a lower gear, because you're going to have no torque depending on what you change.
Yeah, correct. As far as picking out a gear ratio, it just, like I said before, it comes down to motor and tranny combo, tire size, and then where you're essentially trying to be at RPM wise, at what speed, what you're using it for, whether you're towing or whether you're cruising or rock crawling or racing.
Or all the above. I do feel like back before the internet, that was just one of those things where you had to know a guy and had to figure that shit out, and you were doing calculus and you're like, I don't know. And now we're so spoiled. You can get online. You could say, here's my horsepower. Here's my transfer case, or maybe no transfer case. This is the tire ratio, wheel ratio, gear ratio I'm running. Where do I want to be?
Yeah. There's the stuff online now is limitless. It's definitely made it a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, there was like a forum where you had to just dig and find like this ratio sheet that some guy put together. But nowadays it's plentiful. So figure all that out when you're creating your build or looking at the big picture and where you want to be.
Yeah. We can help anybody walk through it too, and run it back and kind of give different scenarios at different ratios, or different scenarios with different tire sizes and so on and so forth. And like I said, everyone's a little bit different. There's a couple, like I said, the go-tos, like the 373 and the 12 bolt is a real common go-to. It just depends on what you want your build to be. And
do you have a website that you prefer to go to, or do you just figure it out, or you do it all the time?
There's a lot of stuff that we do all the time. There's a million websites out there. We have a program just downloaded on the computer that we use. But they all do the same thing. It's just figuring out the final drive of the tranny, what tire size and where you want to be at. So
if you're building a truck, C10 or K10, what's your combo? If I said, Ray, you have all the money in the world, I want to know what motor you're putting in. I want to know what transfer case. Let's do 4-wheel drive. I want to know what transmission, transfer case, and front and rear axles and ratios. What are you building?
Again, depending on what I'm doing with it. Being that I own a diff shop, I would probably definitely some sort of LS platform, power plant. 4L80, I'm assuming, on the tranny. I'd probably reach out to some of the guys that we do a lot of work with that are much better and more knowledgeable on it than I am. 205 Atlas transfer case, 44 front, 9-inch rear.
Wow. Yeah, we're so lucky because I've got a guy that I'm getting ready to interview. We've tentatively scheduled it, but I always like to talk about, at this point, we know what the best stuff is because it's been built 40, 50 years. So we know that if you're building the ultimate truck, whether it's in your shop or in the garage or whatever, you kind of know what the best parts are now. You know what I mean? So when you think about 44s and 60s and 205s and 4L80s and LS3s, it's kind of proven what's the best out there. So that recipe it's tried and true.
Yeah, for sure. And that's I always go back to the 9 inches. It's one of those things that it just doesn't get better. You know? I'm sure there's other stuff, different styles but for as far as like a bolt-in application that doesn't weigh 1 million pounds and then parts are readily available.
Hey, Ford got one thing right, and it was a 9-inch.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You got a lot of 350s and small blocks and LSs and Fords all over the world, and we got a lot of 9 inches in just about everything else.
Yep.
Yeah, so good for them. Okay, so what about parts? So do you guys retail a lot of parts? If one of our audiences, they're building, they want to do it themselves, or they're out in Indiana, they're out in Kansas, wherever, can they hit you up and be like,
Absolutely.
Hey, Ray, I want to buy these parts for my front end, my rear end, my diff, my whatever. I heard the pod, and I want to buy my parts from you. Can you put together a kit and send it to me?
Yeah, absolutely. We have couple different ways that we do it. If you're not local, we can always drop ship it to you. If people call and have any questions or just want to get some info of, pointed in the right direction, and we can happy to help. So it's we can ship parts. You're welcome to come to the shop and buy parts. We have a fair amount of inventory in stock. So yeah, we do everything.
How about online? Do you have much inventory online or not so much?
We don't. It's something we're trying to grow towards. It's kind of a fair amount of work as far as getting the website set up and that stuff, and staying on top of your inventory. So we're working towards it. We're not there yet, though.
Do you have a big turnover of your inventory? I mean, is it something where you're reordering every week, every 2 weeks, or is it like, holy shit, man, we're life's good. We're blowing through our parts.
Yeah, I do a fairly large stock order about once a week.
Cool. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we try and keep just about anything domestic in stock. Any of the ratios that we move on any kind of a common basis we have in stock. Replacement axle shafts and small parts and axle bearings and things like that. We stock all that, and small seals and so on and so forth. So I trying to keep an inventory and continue to grow it.
Cool. And for the audience, it's really easy. No coast. So not West Coast, not East Coast, because we're in Arizona. No coast. Diff, D-I-F-F. That's diff.com, and that's also your IG, correct? No Coast Diff. Obviously, it's Differential, but the webpage or the website and the way to get a hold of Ray or Rico, nocoastdiff.com, and then the IG, No Coast Diff. What would you say is the top 3 phone calls you take on a weekly basis? People looking for info or asking questions, or what's something that comes across the desk a lot?
A lot of it is either somebody calls and they try and describe a noise over the phone and they want a price to fix it.
You guys should record those.
So, or they try and explain what they think that they're hearing, and they want the price for that. And that's kind of the frustrating part, because I try and tell people all the time, I can throw a number out there, but until we get it in and get our hands on it, there's no way to be accurate. We kind of pride ourselves on, when you bring something down to us, I give you a written estimate, send you the email, comes through as a text link. It's in writing. You can see, hey, this is where we're at. This is your out the door cost. It's not going to change. There's taxes included, all the stuff. There's no surprises. And we stand behind that. So I would prefer that people just come down, we pop it open, see what's going on, give you a solid price. I don't prefer doing hey, you could be between here and here. I mean, I will do it. I prefer not to. It tends to make a lot of people a little gun shy, because if I'm going to give you 2 prices, I'll do, best case, worst case. Here's your absolute best case, and here's your absolute worst case. So absolute worst case could be 5 times as much as what it's really going to be, but I won't know until we get it open.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you got to get it down there, right?
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. And we have kind of a set price that if you bring it in and we pop it open and we say, hey, here's where we think that you're at. This is what we can see from here. If you decide not to have us do the work, we just basically treat it as a diff service. We button it back up, put fresh oil in it, and you're welcome to go on your way and, shop around or do it on your own or whatever.
Do you deal a lot with individuals, or more through like a bigger company, like you said, some of the maintenance, where you guys are located? There's a lot of car, truck buildings around you. So do you get a lot of shops that reach out to you as well?
Yeah. It's a good mix. We're real fortunate. We deal with a lot of really, really good shops. We deal with a lot of like fleet companies and stuff. It's, gears aren't that tricky. They're fairly easy until they aren't. So it's kind of one of those things, if you don't do it all the time and do it every day and have a fairly decent inventory, it can get costly if, a lot of shops try to get into it and then it's dead on a rack for a couple days, or they get the wrong parts, and, there's different year breaks for different things and where they change different models or things like that. So we're pretty fortunate to have a fairly good mix of just individuals and other shops.
Cool. Well, here's to 13 plus more years, and you guys keep growing and keep learning, and we're glad we have you here as our differential shop and the guys that we can go to. Anything else to add?
Not that I can think of.
Well, for you guys out there, again, we've got Ray, No Coast Diff, DIFF. You can hit them up, either IG, go to their webpage. You got Ray and Rico out there doing what they do. And hopefully we hit most of the questions. I'm trying to think. Obviously, transmissions, front end, rear end, brakes. Do you have a front or rear brake that you guys find that you install more often than not and really just love the parts?
We're pretty big fans of Willwood.
Okay.
They're really easy to deal with. Their customer support's really awesome. Again, we do most of our custom stuff through Mosier, and Mosier's a Willwood dealer, so it makes it real convenient for us. So just pay the shipping once.
What about Moog? I used to get all my stuff, I still do, from Napa, and then I could always get the Moog, and I still can. But did Moog change to overseas, or what was the deal? Something happened there.
It's something, I'm not sure what happened. I try and avoid it. If we try and do OEM whenever possible.
Yeah.
So if we're doing small parts like that, we try and stay OEM.
So where do you get your OE parts through here?
But most of the stuff I order in from our main vendor in California. So
okay.
That's the other reason why we try and keep a fair amount of inventory, is so that I'm not waiting a couple days for it. I try and have it on the shelf.
Yeah, I just wondered if there's a GM or Ford dealer that, like we have AutoNation parts right here. They're like a mile from here. I just wondered if they sell that type of stuff as well. For OE.
So we a lot of it's AutoNation, and a lot of it is the Bill Luke dealerships.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We have big dealerships around here. So he's our local guy. If he can help you at all, hit him up. Again, this is Ray from No Coast. I appreciate your time, Ray, and glad you could make it down today.
Thank you.
Thanks, brother.
You bet.
Did we hit them all? Did we answer all your questions? Did you make it to the end? I think it was good. I think anytime we have them up here in the studio hanging out, we're just shooting the shit, really, is kind of the theme. Pop a cold one and sit back and what would the audience want to hear? What would the audience want to know? So I appreciate Ray coming down and, again, just being our go-to here in the Valley. They've been a part of a lot of builds. I know they've done a lot of work for a lot of really good builders here locally, some badass trucks, their history, their reputation, and we're stoked to have them as our differential heroes. Ray, thanks again. For you guys listening, I appreciate you tuning in. As always, check out the last few pods. You've got 307, Byron Morgan, and check out the last few pods that we've dropped for the new year, and we'll be back with 309. Thanks, guys. Late.